Big round of applause here for the man of the hour, Rich Little. Here he comes. Hey, Rich. Excellent. Just pop up here. Have you ever heard so much incredible talent in all your life as you heard out here from Vaughn Monroe and Donald Duck? And Kermit the Frog.
Kermit the Frog, yes.
Have you ever seen a group this large that was that untalented?
We could put A Christmas Carol on right here. Let me see. Yes, we could. Yes, we could. Yeah.
I told the folks before the show, and I don't know if they know at home, that you're feeling just a little poorly. This has got to be tough when you come into town.
I'm feeling good.
Well, you feeling better now?
I'm feeling great.
Well, see, just as I was going to
an audience like this, how could you not? Yeah. I feel great.
Well, we've got them from all over. How did you? I've seen you perform at the. I saw you at Ruth Eckerd Hall a couple of years ago when you were here, and it's a fantastic show. And of course, this is entirely different. A Christmas Carol. How do you do that? I've seen it done on tape, where you come out and you play a bunch of different roles, but that's got to be a little tougher in live.
Well, I had to get somebody to play Scrooge because I couldn't play Scrooge. I couldn't play the leading character because I play all the other people that come into his life, like Jacob Marley and the Spirits and Bob Cratchit. I even play Mrs. Cratchit as Edith Bunker from All in the Family Orchard.
Oh. You have your, this is where I guess your brother Chris comes in as part of the show.
My brother Chris plays Scrooge, and he said, how am I going to play it? I said, simple, just be yourself. But actually, he does a pretty good job. He really does. I played it in the original HBO special that was shown for about 5 years on HBO. But then, you see, you could play all the parts because you could splice them all together. But on the stage, I mean, you can't stand there and talk to yourself. Although I have, but we have about 10 people in the cast. We have some great singers and dancers. We have original music, and the three spirits are Jimmy Carter, George Bush, and Ronald Reagan.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And Richard Nixon plays Jacob Marley. And he drags tapes instead of chains.
You mentioned Richard Nixon. You know, I remember the first impressionist I can remember really having an impact, and I'm sure somebody's going to correct me on this, but when Vaughn Meader started doing the Kennedy family, and he became the definitive Kennedy, but then you became the definitive Richard Nixon, and you couldn't look at Richard Nixon without thinking of Richard Little.
I know. Even today, I was in the Macy's Day Parade, and along the route, kids 3 and 4 years old were all going... They didn't even know who Nixon was.
But they know who Richard Little is.
But they talk a lot like Nixon. You can hear them going, pee-pee, po-po, potty, potty, potty.
At what point in your life did you realize that you had a pretty lucrative career in doing this kind of thing, doing impressions?
When I imitated my homeroom teacher when I was about 18 years old. And it infuriated them. Then I knew I had something.
This is like classroom practice.
Yeah, I used to, when the teacher would ask me a question in class, I would answer the teacher in their voice. And I usually give the wrong answer. But the interesting thing about it was, now that I think back, the teacher didn't know I was doing them. See, all the other kids did, because nobody hears themselves, you see, so they couldn't understand while everybody was laughing, while I was giving a very serious answer. The wrong answer, but a serious answer. And I realized that this was kind of a popular thing, and that I became, very popular doing it, so I continued doing it after school and added to my repertoire local politicians, then movie stars, and just kept building from there. But it started at school.
And I would have to think that the real uphill, or the crest of your success at that point would have to come with Nixon, because I mean you really were for almost 8 years. Didn't quite make it 8, but
yeah, I've done all the presidents since. Reagan, of course, was my favorite because I had a great rapport with him, and he loved it, and you could almost do any joke in front of Reagan. And once Nancy explained it to him, he was good. See, Reagan is the most physical. I mean, Nixon is too. Nixon's uncoordinated. I mean, Nixon. But Reagan is always disbelief. Like, I swear. Reagan always has that stare, and if you said hello to him, he'd look at you like, "Where am I?" You know? Hello, President Reagan. Oh, yes. Well, hello. You know, and it's kind of that blank stare that, and then Jimmy Carter, hot damn.
Tell you what, we're going to be back in just a moment with, who knows, my favorite Kirk Douglas and Jimmy Stewart. Anybody you want is right here on the Really Big Show today, including even him, Ed Sullivan. Rich Little is our guest today, and we were just talking about the presidents. He has mastered all of the past, and he's got one coming up, and everybody in the audience is wanting to know, what about Bill Clinton?
Well, Bill Clinton, of course, all during the campaign, had laryngitis. And each debate, the last one that we had, it sounded like this. And I think when that laryngitis clears up, that Bill Clinton's going to sound like Gregory Peck.
But no, it was interesting though that seems to be the weak part of his, of his image is his voice, and he strained a lot,
yeah,
and speaking so much. So I don't know what he really sounds like, but I think he's going to be a good subject.
Oh, I think so too, because he's
do.
from the South. Al Gore, now, he's going to be tough. You know, people are talking about 8 years from now, if Clinton is successful, Al Gore will be a candidate. You got Jack Kemp and a lot of other people that don't have as many idiosyncrasies about them.
Yeah.
That's got to be tough and kind of concern you. I mean, you want to see somebody coming out of the woods that you can really lay on.
Yeah, the thing is that the pressures of that office, I mean, Clinton's going to be a great subject because things are going to start piling up on him, and he's going to start doing and saying things, and I'm going to be right there jumping on him. Poor guy hasn't got a chance with me watching. I mean, that's the thing. When you looked at George Bush at the beginning, the thing is, when he first came on, didn't finish his sentence, he kept talking, I want to say that, and then he'd get on to something else. And,
a big George Bush fan out there. Who is the toughest person you ever had to try to capture? To me, it'd be somebody like a Kirk Douglas or something like that. How about for you?
Oddly enough, it was probably Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford? Yeah.
Gerald Ford had kind of a monotone voice and talked kind of not too exciting. And, just like this, and you didn't raise it or lower it, you just kept it like this. And I nodded off a lot doing him. He wasn't the best subject in the world, but I think Clinton's going to be okay.
Who's your favorite all-time subject going through the movies? I mean, the Cagneys and Stewarts and all the
I'd probably Jimmy Stewart.
Do you ever get tired of people coming up to you and say, "Hey, do so-and-so, do so-and-so"? Because I'm sure it's going to happen here today. But
no, not really. Sometimes you're in a restaurant. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a restaurant, and the waitress said, "I don't want a tip. I want an impression." I said, "Do you want me to leave it under the plate?" So I did Ross Perot and put it under the plate.
Did Ross Perot. I really enjoyed this meal, and I like this restaurant. I'm going to buy it.
In looking at the subjects coming up, the popular movie stars, the people like we were talking about Kevin Costner. Nobody does Kevin Costner
How do you
today,
imitate Kevin Costner?
And I don't know. I mean, you just don't have the John Waynes and the James
that's
Cagneys,
very
and
true.
Kirk Douglas is just one of my
Kirk
favorites.
Douglas. Well, you're right. You're right. Or the Walter Brennans. you know.
Oh, I can't do Walter anymore. I've forgotten how.
Walter Brennan's interesting. As he got older, his voice got higher. Did you?
I never.
I mean, when he was younger, doing pictures years ago, he sounded down there like that, you know. Yeah. And then as you get older and went on those programs like the Real McCoys, he started talking up there like that. True though.
Is there any kind of thing that goes through your mind when you try to come up with an impression? Like just Walter Brennan, the only one I could ever do, and I can't do that at all now. But I used to. That song by Billy Joe, what was it?
Old
BJ.
Rivers?
No, it was the Everybody's Out of Town. It was a song by BJ. I can't even remember the guy's name. Everybody's Out of Town. It kind of went like that or something. But even you have to have something to get into an impersonation. Are there easy ways to do it? I'm looking for tips. I may start my career again with Walter Brennan.
Well, you know, I mean, if the physical thing is important, you know. I mean, when you're doing Johnny Carson, you have to see Johnny's like an ostrich. I mean, he spent his whole career looking around, you know. Finally, Jay Leno snuck up on him. But so you know, the physical thing is important. If you can get into it physically, then it helps the impression a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you look like a person and the impression isn't that good, the physical will help, and it works the reverse too. Sometimes, if your voice is really good, people will say, "Gosh, looked exactly like him," and you don't, you know.
No way.
But one helps the other.
We're going to take a break in just a moment. Back with a whole lot more folks on Harrison Company. As it would happen anywhere, everybody out here is saying, hey, get him to do so-and-so, get him to do so-and-so. Rich Little is our very special guest today, and he's doing Rich Little's A Christmas Carol. A lot of folks used to call it Dickens. Rich, you've come a long way. But it is definitely Rich Little's A Christmas Carol because he brings so many people to that. Who out here has a question that they would like to ask of Mr. Little? I think we had somebody back here. Yeah. Just hop up. What's your name?
Evelyn Tilbury from Ottawa. Rich, which school did you go to, Lisgar or Glebe?
I went to Lisgar.
Oh, there.
You're from Ottawa?
Yes.
Great. A lot of Canadians come down here, don't they?
We got a bunch.
Good to see, eh?
You mean there was a school named Glebe?
Glebe, yes.
I'd love to heard the cheers on that one. Go Glebe! What a weird name. Who else has a question they'd like to ask? Had somebody here. Yes, ma'am. What's your name? Stand up. Tell us your name.
I'm Ruth Forrest from Brockville, Ontario, where your
my.
mother lives.
Another Canadian.
And I want to thank you for the picture. We got a big picture. My son got a picture, and you signed it for our 50th wedding anniversary.
Oh,
Wow.
great.
Did it take? You back here. Yes, ma'am. Got somebody else back here. What's your name?
I'm Kathy Hill. I'm from Seattle. And I was wondering, you said physical is an important part.
Right.
How do you get women to imitate women, and which ones do you do, and could you do some for us?
Well, the one I've done the most is Carol Channing. And but I do Carol Channing, and I do Jane Stapleton, and I do, of course, Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Who's going to be here tomorrow, by the way. Let me hop right across here if I can get over here. Oh, you got a microphone. Yes, sir. What is your question?
My question is, you're an impersonator now. What did you intend to do before you became one? What
An
was your-
impersonator?
Yeah.
A shepherd. Or a druid, I'm not sure. I used to say that. Isn't that awful? When you go through customs sometime, you shouldn't clown with them. You can be in big trouble. Occupation? Doesn't know who I am. Shepherd. Fine. Where's your flock? I don't know. I don't know. I've thought about that many times. It would have been some form of entertainment. Maybe a television show like this, radio. I started out in radio. I was a disc jockey years ago. and I might have remained there, you know. But I can't see myself doing anything totally remote from show business.
I want you obviously watch TV and things like that. Who do you think is the best of today's impressionists? There are people like Dana Carvey and all, but they seem to be limited a lot to the presidents. Who do you think is the best up-and-coming impressionist?
Well, there's a couple you probably don't even know of. There's a guy named Bob Anderson in Vegas who does the best singing impressions I've ever heard. And there was a fellow that I used on Copycats. This is the show that I'm doing in Vegas right now.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Well, not right now, but I'm going back to it. I've been doing a show there for about a year at the Sahara Hotel, and I'm going back to it in January. And there was a fellow named Gordie Brown who was from my hometown, of all things, Ottawa, and he's pretty good, too. Great. Does a great Michael Jackson, does Geraldo, a lot of different things. I always am attracted to people that do different impressions that haven't been done before, you know, because like Cliff Lawrence in our show that's in Scrooge, he does Robert Wagner. And everybody says, how do you imitate Robert Wagner? But he does it so well that kind of thing really intrigues me.
We'll be back in just a jiffy with more on Harris & Company.